The man you're about to meet had exactly one job: make the lottery impossible to rig, which is a bit like hiring a cat to guard a tuna factory, and then acting surprised when the inventory starts going missing. Eddie Tipton, Director of Information Security for the Multi-State Lottery Association, the human firewall, the one person paid specifically to stop this exact crime, and for roughly 15 years, he was the one committing it. He didn't break in, he had a key, he had a badge. And he built a heist so clean that for years there was no proof it had ever happened. No fingerprints, no witnesses, nothing. And then the whole thing collapsed because he wanted a hot dog. Stay with me. The hot dog is real. It's the best part, and you have to earn it. The promise. Here's what nobody thinks about when they hand over $2 at the gas station. The entire multi-billion-dollar lottery industry rests on one fragile, almost philosophical promise. The numbers are random. That's it. That's the product. You're not buying a slip of paper. You're buying the belief that the cosmos chose those numbers and not a man named Steve with a salary and a grudge. And random, it turns out, is shockingly hard to make. Humans are famously terrible at it. Quick, pick a random number between 1 and 10. You pick 7. Most people pick 7. You feel unique. You are statistically furniture. When a lottery tumbles balls out of a spinning cage on live TV, that's not drama, that's transparency. It's mechanical, it's public, you can watch the physics happen, but a lot of modern games skip the cage. They use a computer. A random number generator humming quietly in a locked, climate-controlled room producing the winning combination, which sounds safer. It is the opposite of safer, because a machine that generates randomness is, underneath the hood, just a program. And every program was written by a person, and that person, hold this thought, might have a brother in Texas who could really use a little money. Computers can't actually be random, by the way. They fake it. They grab some starting value, the date, the time, a temperature reading, and run it through a formula complicated enough that the result looks like pure chaos. Looks like. Because if you happen to know the formula, and you know the starting value, the chaos was never chaos, it was a schedule. You just have to be the kind of person who can read it.
At Roman feasts, lots determined which guest received gold and which received a dead mouse. The draw was scrupulously fair. The cups were arranged beforehand.
The fox with the key. Eddie Tipton was exactly that kind of person, and he had the keys to the room. Remember the room matters later. So look at his position. He helped build the software that ran the draws for state after state after state. He had legitimate, sign-the-form, physical access to the machines. He understood the code at a level almost nobody else on Earth did, because in a lot of cases he had personally written it. He was, in the most literal sense, the fox they hired to install the locks on the hen house. Then asked nicely not to eat any hen. Then handed the only copy of the key with a warm, "We trust you, buddy. You can see where this is going." Eddie saw where this was going about 15 years before anybody else did. So around 2005, he did something genuinely clever, and I resent how clever it is, but it is. He slipped extra code into the number generators, a quiet little add-on, a rootkit, software built to hide its own existence from the system running it, the digital equivalent of a burglar in a t-shirt that says, "I am not a burglar, I am a lamp." And this code did something almost elegant. On a normal day, the lottery was completely, honestly random. Nobody could predict it, including him. The machine behaved exactly as advertised. But on 3 days a year, and only 3, the code woke up. May 27th, November 23rd, December 29th. On those dates, if they landed on the right day of the week, the generator quietly stopped being random and switched to a second, predictable formula, one that Eddie understood perfectly because he wrote it. On those days, the universe wasn't choosing the numbers anymore. The universe was on a coffee break, and Eddie was covering the shift. And the math was good. A system that should offer millions of possible combinations collapsed down to a few hundred. A few hundred. That is no longer a lottery. That's a multiple choice test where you wrote the answer key, photocopied it, and mailed it to yourself. A few hundred combinations isn't gambling. It's a shopping list. Now you'd assume a stunt like this leaves a smoking gun. Some rogue file, some weird line of code an auditor eventually trips over. It does not. And this is the part that makes security professionals want to lie down on the carpet. The code deleted itself. It did its job on the chosen day, predicted the numbers, then erased itself from existence like it was never there. The crime cleaned up after itself. By the time anyone inspected the machine, there was nothing to find. No body, because the murder weapon had also volunteered to be the cleaning crew. There's a detail about that room I still don't fully believe. According to the case, the security cameras in there recorded 1 second out of every minute. To save storage space? which means that for 59 seconds of every single minute, the room holding the beating heart of the entire operation was technically blind. A vault where the guard blinks for 59 seconds, then opens his eyes just long enough to catch his own reflection and think, yep, all good. And who would have had a hand in designing that camera setup? Go ahead, guess. He didn't just hold the keys, he wrote the nap schedule for the watchtower. So let's add up what Eddie built. An untraceable method, self-deleting evidence, a blind spot in the surveillance, legitimate access nobody would ever question, and a crime that only fired 3 days a year. So even the faint pattern of suspicious wins got smeared thin across different states and seasons. This is not a man who got lucky. This is a man who gave luck a job description, a direct deposit, and a non-disclosure agreement.
Untraceable, self-erasing, 3 workdays a year. Frankly, the finest resume I've ever seen. He should have applied to run the lottery. Oh, right.
The flaw. There was just one flaw in the perfect crime. The same flaw that wrecks basically every perfect crime ever attempted, from the Trojan Horse to Fire Festival. He could rig the numbers. He could not be seen winning them. Think it through. If Eddie Tipton, Director of Information Security for the lottery, strolls up to a counter and claims a jackpot on December 29th, the jig isn't just up. It's in orbit, waving a little flag that reads, "Please audit me." He needed other hands, people who couldn't be traced back to him. So he brought in his brother, Tommy, a former justice of the peace down in Texas, because nothing says integrity like a former judicial officer laundering rigged lottery tickets, and an old college friend, a businessman named Robert Rhodes. The plan was simple and on paper, airtight. Eddie supplies the numbers, his guys buy the tickets in other states, they collect quietly, everybody splits it, nobody connects the dots. And for a while, this is the uncomfortable part, it just worked. A $2 million jackpot in Wisconsin, prizes in Colorado, Oklahoma, Kansas, money flowing out of a machine that was supposedly unbeatable into the pockets of men who happened to know the one guy in charge of keeping it honest. It was a reverse Robin Hood. Take from the people buying tickets, give to the people who wrote the software. Then came the big one. December 29th, 2010, Iowa. A hot lotto jackpot worth $16.5 million. This is the ticket that ends everything. And here's the beautiful part. The rig didn't fail. The numbers hit. The ticket was a genuine winner. What failed was the cashing out. And the cashing out was a slow-motion catastrophe, because for nearly a year, nobody claimed it. $16 million just sitting there like a forgotten gym bag in the middle of an airport, which is, in itself, the single most suspicious thing a lottery prize can possibly do. Then, with the 1-year deadline hours away, a lawyer appears to claim it on behalf of a trust. A trust that, when you tugged on the thread, led to a corporation in Belize. And when investigators reasonably asked, sure, but who actually bought the ticket? The lawyer withdrew the claim entirely, walked away from $16 million rather than say a name. That's not a red flag, that's a red planet. At which point, every alarm in the state of Iowa went off in unison. So investigators did the obvious thing. They pulled the surveillance tape from the store that sold the winning ticket, a gas station in Des Moines. And there, on the grainy footage, is a stocky man in a hoodie buying the ticket. And because the universe has a sense of humor that borders on sadistic, also buying hot dogs. The most expensive hot dogs in recorded history, this man outsmarted every algorithm in a multi-state lottery, and then paused to grab a couple of roller grill franks that had been spinning since the Clinton administration. There he is, the buyer, the face of the perfect crime. And here is where it detonates in the most poetic way imaginable. Eddie Tipton was the security director, which means Eddie Tipton was part of the investigation into the suspicious ticket. He was in the building. He was near the case. And when that surveillance video started circulating, the footage of the mysterious hooded man, people who worked with Eddie looked at it and thought, wait, the build, the walk. And then they heard him because there was audio and the recognition snapped into place. That's not a stranger. That's Eddie. That's our guy. The man helping hunt the suspect was the suspect. It's the killer playing the lead detective in his own true crime documentary. He swore he'd been in Texas. The tape said Des Moines. And a hot dog, it turns out, is a carbohydrate-based witness that never forgets.
The great mind is never defeated by its enemies, only by its appetites. I myself was once apprehended over a particularly assertive cheese.
The ghost's fingerprint. Now, remember the self-deleting code? The reason there was no evidence? That should have saved him. Every machine he'd touched had wiped itself clean, except one. Wisconsin, it turned out, had quietly held on to the actual generator from a rigged draw. Apparently the one place evidence goes to retire in peace. Never wiped it, never swapped it out, and when forensic examiners finally cracked it open and went looking, there it was. The unauthorized code, the extra instructions. The little add-on telling a random machine to stop being random on exactly the right days. The ghost left a single fingerprint on the one machine he could never reach back into and erase. In 2017, Eddie Tipton was convicted of what investigators called the largest lottery fraud in American history. He was sentenced to as much as 25 years. He was paroled after serving around 5, released to Texas, a state with a lottery he is now, one assumes, not permitted within 100 yards of. He's out there somewhere right now buying a hot dog legally, staring at a quick pick, feeling a deep and philosophical ache. The takeaway. And here's the thing that stays with me. The system he attacked was honestly well protected. Strong locks, strong code, cameras, audits, procedures, the entire ritual. It was built to repel exactly the kind of attack he ran. And none of it mattered, because the threat wasn't outside the building trying to claw its way in. The threat had a parking spot. The threat had a badge. The threat was in the room helping write the rules. You can build the most secure vault on the planet, and it will protect you from everyone except the person you handed the blueprints to. But that's not even the real lesson. His security didn't catch him. His genius didn't betray him. His greed did. He built a crime the machine could not expose, the cameras could not see, the evidence itself refused to keep, and then he walked into a gas station on camera to buy his own winning ticket because he could not bear to let someone else hold it. He was, in the end, a toddler who bakes a cake and won't let anyone else cut it. He out-engineered the entire system. He could not out-engineer wanting it for himself. And that is the one vulnerability nobody has ever managed to patch, because human nature doesn't get software updates.